Okay, well, hello and welcome. Thank you all for being here today. My name is Heather Roberts, and I'm with the Social Policy Institute, the Navigating Change program. And I want to welcome you to the Navigating Change Lunch and Learn webinar series. Navigating Change, this webinar series is an 8-part series designed to provide individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, their families, and professionals who support them with helpful information during your lunch hour. This series is part of a project led by the Social Policy Institute of San Diego State University in partnership with the San Diego Regional Center and the Department of Developmental Services, focused on supporting youth ages 16 to 22 and their families in accessing services and support as they transition to adulthood. My name is Heather, and in addition to curating and facilitating this webinar series, I'm also a project lead for the Navigating Change initiative that launched in Imperial Valley earlier this year. And I have also been serving in the program development of Navigating Change and as a family navigator for families who participated in Navigating Change here in San Diego. Before we get to today's topic, which is near and dear to my heart, I wanted to review some brief housekeeping. Today's session will be recorded and posted to YouTube. A follow-up email will be sent to you with the link, as well as some helpful resources related to today's discussion. At the end of today's webinar, you will be invited to complete a feedback survey. We really encourage you to complete the survey as it provides us with helpful hints in continuing to deliver programming that matters to you. Please enter any questions or comments you have into the chat box at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We'll answer all questions at the end. Today, I'm very happy to spend the next 45 minutes or so in conversation with a few people who, like me, grew up alongside siblings with intellectual and developmental disabilities. We hope that this discussion will illuminate the often unexplored perspective of non-disabled siblings as we reflect on how our lives have been and continue to be shaped by our role as a sib. Please help me in giving a warm welcome to our panelists, Neelum Arya, Amanda O'Neill, and David Ontiveros. So, hi everyone. I'm so happy to see you all. Let's start with introductions. If you would, please tell us a little bit about your family growing up, what it looks like now, and something that you and your sibling enjoy doing together.
Should I start, Heather?
Sure.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Neelum Arya. I have a sister, Sheila Arya, who is now she's a year and a half younger than me. I grew up here in San Diego, and we always knew that she had some issues, but for our entire family, so my mom, my dad, and I have an older sister as well. We've always just really lived here. And now I have a younger sister. Younger sister. I have a daughter of my own, who is 8, and that has has created some interesting challenges with thinking about this. My sister Sheila, and the thing that we love to do most is go to concerts and like outdoor fun activities like musicals and stuff.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing all of that. And Amanda, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Amanda O'Neill. My sister and I are 16 months apart. I am the oldest of 3. So we have a younger brother who's 4 years younger than her, 5 years younger than me. We grew up in Arizona. I live in San Diego, but everyone else still lives in Arizona. But get to see each other at least once a month. Something me and my sister, and just background on my sister, her name's Kristen. We found out she had epilepsy when she was 4 months old, developmental delays associated with that, and now late diagnosed adult autism. And our family dynamic, yeah, like I said, we're in separate states, but still talk all the time. And our favorite thing to do also is go to concerts and musicals. So we'll see you there, Neelam.
Hi
David.
everyone. Yeah, my name is David. I am the oldest of three kids. I was 9 when my youngest sister was born, and that's Pati. So Pati was born with Down syndrome. Um, the makeup, it's a complex one, right? So in 2010-ish, my parents ended up getting divorced, which then became where my mom was the main caregiver essentially. So me and my middle sister, we were kind of providing the support at the house. My dad was helping with any sort of like big major respite care that was needed. My mom and my sister were like glued at the hip, so that was a great time. She did end up passing away recently, 2020, and so me and my sister and my dad ended up taking care of her, of Pati, and really jumping on all hands on deck, basically. We're now co-conservators for her, and just on top of COVID, on top of school transition, there was a lot of like all of that on, including the like dealing of the grief with my mom and everything. There's just been a lot of care that's been needed that we've all been kind of jumping in on to kind of help supplement all of the support. In terms of the fun and in terms of the great stuff, we love painting our nails or painting nails together. I also paint my nails, so it's fun to kind of like jump in that space. Watching movies and getting to show her like different movies. She's very much a rewatcher, so it's fun to be able to add a new one to her avenues. And then it used to there birthdays were a huge deal for the family. And so she was always the star of her birthdays. And so it was getting to plan those out, getting to really talk to her about birthdays. That had always been a great time. We don't do that as much nowadays, but that has always been great memories in my mind.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, David. Um, and yeah, I hope that um, through this conversation, I'm very sorry about the loss of your mom, but I think not but, and I think that that is something that all of us siblings wonder, like what will life look like when our parents pass on and we are responsible for our siblings. So I'm glad that we have you here today. Like I said, my name's Heather Roberts. I'm the oldest of three kids. When I was two, my sister Allison was born with profound intellectual and developmental disabilities. And just a little over a year after that, my brother was born. So all three of us were like there's only 3.5 years between all of us. So my mom was very busy with all of us when we were small. Um, we're now all in our early 50s. My sister lives with my mom about 20 minutes away from me, and my mom is my sister's primary caregiver. I'm one of her main part-time caregivers, and my mom and I are her co-conservators. My parents divorced when we were like in our late teens, early 20s. And my father also lives about 20 minutes from my sister, but isn't very involved in her care. My brother and I are very emotionally close, but he lives on the other side of the country. And he and his wife are raising two teenage boys, and his youngest son actually has Down syndrome. So he's living the experience of being a sibling and now a parent of someone that has disabilities. So the first thing I wanted to ask, and this will be, I'll start with you, David. So when people ask what it was like growing up with your sibling, what's the first story that comes to mind, and what do you think that exemplifies about your growing up experience?
Yeah, I think the immediate thing that kind of comes to mind is, like I said, birthdays. It's not even just one birthday, but almost all of her birthdays that like encompass a lot of it. And it really, for me, gave the opportunity to like have like it. She really was the star in of her birthdays. Like present time, like opening presents and everything was like a big like all of the extended family came around, sat around. And for me, it like really exemplifies just like I'll talk about it in like a few other questions as well, but the flexibility and just kind of like the allowance that is required for those moments. Like it really is, we're going moment by moment, and sometimes it's a good day, and sometimes like if it's a good present, here is these kind of reactions or emotions that might come up. And as I was growing older and those birthdays kept coming and kept happening, it was really like, okay, what's it going to look like this time around? What do families like? What does the family need to know? Because my mom was the one that was sitting with my sister, opening up the presents. Again, they were glued at the hip, right? And so I was also, me and my sister are 9 years apart, and so it, I got to play more of the like, okay, let me go and grab these things, or let me go and do this quick thing, and really kind of doing more of the like the running around background kind of work that made me really focus on like, okay, this isn't a like it was a weird time growing up, but I was 9 when she was born. And so I had already had a lot of the like big moments with my parents. And so now I'm like, okay, I get to like let her have this moment. And it just kept coming and coming. And it really gave a lot of like grace for me to allow her, here is this moment for you. This is really for you right now. What can I do to support your moment? So those are the kind of like things that come up. When I saw that question, I was like, oh, birthdays, obviously. So yeah, that's kind of my bit on that.
Nice. Yeah. I'm sure that was a big adjustment if you're the only child for nearly a decade and all of a sudden you have to, you know, share your parents with a new kid and a
Yeah.
kid that has, special needs and needs extra attention. That's a big adjustment.
Mhm.
Um, I'm Neelam or Amanda, did you want to answer this one? If not, I can share my experience.
You go ahead, Heather, and I'll
Okay.
continue to think.
All right. Um, so as I was coming up with the questions for our time together, when I read this, one of my most powerful memories with my sister is I was maybe, I'm thinking like maybe around third grade, and we had gone to the movies with my mom, my sister, my brother, and I. And when we were leaving, there were these like middle school age boys that I saw them staring at her and then mimicking her and making fun of her. And it was really, it just, there were so many emotions that came up. I was embarrassed. I was mad. I was protective. I was just, all of those things. Like one, I felt like because there was something quote unquote wrong with my sister, that meant our family was weird. And I was mad because I knew my sister and loved my sister and was used to her different sounds and different movements. So I was mad at these dumb boys who were making fun of her. Um, and it was interesting to me that was the very first thing that came up for me because as far as like what that exemplifies in my life overall, just this sense of being that my knowing at a very young age that my sister was vulnerable and that it was part of my responsibility and my role was to protect her, which has really, sort of informed my life, I would say. So yeah, it was I mean, there's always lots of good things too. I forgot to mention music is also the thing my sister and I do. But yeah, that was one of the like, ooh, like hit you in the gut sort of experiences. So let's go on to this next question. Um, I want to hear what you guys think in terms of what qualities or strengths that you think you developed because of your experience as a sibling, and how they have influenced your personal and professional life. Um, and I know uh, I see Neelam and Amanda smiling. Amanda, I'll let you go first on this one.
All right. Well, similar to the story you had just told, because my sister was so close in age to me, I always was either at school at the same time with her, at the same school as her, and seeing my mom, have to fight for support services for her at any capacity to get access to school. My mom is also a sibling of an individual with disabilities. So I was raised by a sib, which I think brought another perspective of how she approached, supporting our dynamic as a family. But even as like an eldest daughter, which is a hot topic phrase right now, being so protective of her and protective of my brother and everything in that capacity. But seeing my mom fight for her and just the basic support she required to access education, and having to fight for things, right? I just got outright, right? I didn't have to fight for them. My parents didn't have to fight for me to get anything above what, of course, we're all entitled to. So when I was a junior in high school, I had always wanted to be a lawyer, but when I was a junior in high school, my mom's also a speech language pathologist. So I'm just versed in all of this from all angles. My mom came home from an IEP meeting that she was at for one of her clients and said, "There's a special ed attorney there." And I was like, "Yes, that's what I'm going to do." So now I am a special education attorney. So I represent students with a variety of disabilities to get access to support services and placements from school districts that they are not receiving, and ensuring their federal and state entitlements are granted to them. And through that, I have now been a special ed attorney for 11 and a half years. And I think that I come into it with true empathy, not just sympathy, but true empathy of understanding the struggle the families go through. And so I think that allows me to come into it with more compassion than just transactional, "I'm here to get your money," et cetera, right? Of no, I know what the fight feels like. I know how this challenges. And I also now see, with her being 36, what that fight looked like and how it impacted her now as an adult. And I have to say that now, working with my clients and seeing the other end of it, I now am more informed on how to support my clients in getting to that transition age. Like, what do I really need to be fighting for? What do we really need to be looking at? So her impact on me is my whole life. This is what I do now every
Yeah.
day.
Wow.
Yeah.
Can I ask quickly for the clients that you work with,
Mhm.
what age range are the people you're
Sure.
supporting?
So typically school age based, so 3 to 22 for the most part. I do support families that need to start transitioning to their SSI funding, getting regional center eligibility, kind of comorbid with that, like not the main focus, but yes, school aged students.
Wonderful. Great. Thank you. Neelam, I know you are also in the legal professions, so I would love to hear from you.
Yeah, so very similar, very like, actually Heather, you talked about protecting, being concerned about being like having this protector role and really focusing on that. Amanda, then you just, some of these like very specific hurdles and obstacles that you're trying to help uh, navigate and help families overcome. I had that same kind of idea, but also did policy work. So my main area has been policy reform. I'm a lawyer and went to policy school and have spent my career working on big issue areas. So, like getting children health insurance. And then for probably about 20 years, really trying to get kids out of the adult criminal justice system, and working on kids with disabilities because the sheer volume of people who are involved in the criminal justice system, really as a reflection of the fact that we do not properly accommodate people with disabilities and we are not properly providing them services. That is the one location in our society where they will accept people with disabilities, regardless, instead of, we might not have beds in mental health. There will always be a bed in a jail or a prison cell. And unfortunately, and that is completely the wrong place. And so that is what I have really spent the bulk of my career working on, and really trying to figure out what are the kinds of policy interventions that we need to do on the front end, to make sure that children don't end up in those situations. And I think that transition period is really, and is the central one that I think parents get a lot more support through special ed, even if there's lots of problems with special ed. But that transition from the education, the kind of home-like or family involvement, where family involvement is a central feature of the education system, that handoff to the adult side is a real tricky one. And I'll say that my younger sister never had any real issues. She was like, when she was younger, like has diagnosis of autism, and at that time it was developmental delay and mental retardation were the actual diagnoses. But she's very functional, and had lots of she was able to participate in a lot of things. But in that transition moment is when she developed mental health issues, which our family was not prepared for. And really, we had no clue. And that has actually been the psychiatric disabilities that she faces are a much more significant burden on our family than, let's say, the intellectual disability. And I will say it's that handoff period that was the most challenging for our family. Is something that I think parents, especially if they're looking at the transition age, need to really be cognizant about how, that both the transition period, but also recognizing that there might be multiple transition periods, right? In the same way that for typical developing individuals, like there's differences between 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s and beyond, right? And so we don't tend to think of it that way. We think of like child and adult, but in reality there are these major life course things that happen over the life course that we should be, thinking about.
Yeah. Wow, there's a lot to think about in that answer from both of you guys. Um, Neelam, you addressed something that I think, so David and I have both worked in this navigating change program, and you're bringing up a lot of what we have seen with the families that we have worked with, sort of the whole impetus behind this grant and this program is specifically what you were saying, how the transition from sort of school age services into adult services is like night and day. You know, when they're in school and it's special ed, everything's sort of unified and you have your IEP meetings and everything sort of centralized. And then once they age out of school, all the services are so fragmented, and the parents are just sort of like, we don't know what we don't know, like we don't know what we're supposed to be doing, and it's so overwhelming. And you also mentioned this, that often people with intellectual disabilities also have mental illness and psychiatric challenges, and that the combination of those two things can make it so difficult to find the right programs and service providers, because there's, if their intellectual developmental disabilities are, quote unquote, too difficult, then mental health, behavioral health won't treat them, and vice versa, So, yeah, and of course, the criminal justice. I mean, you just highlighted so many of these big macro issues. And so, with that, I want to turn to my fellow macro social worker, David, and yeah, just sort of ask again, sort of what are the quality and strengths that you think you developed from being a sibling, and how that's influenced your professional life?
Yeah. First, thank you to both my fellow panelists here. I love being on a panel because I get to hear so many amazing things and so many cool experiences from different people. But I always forget that on a panel, I also have to give an answer. Like, so I'm like, I get lost in your guys' answers and so yeah. Yes, to the question. I think for me, I talked a little bit about it in terms of the birthday, kind of using the birthday as the catalyst for that. But I think for me, the patience, the grace, and the kind of like flexibility and adaptability that is needed. Not even needed for that certain situation or for that certain day, but also just to sustain yourself and just to kind of not burn yourself out in a long-term kind of situation. I think that didn't really like hit. I knew about it, I saw it, but I didn't really recognize it or realize the like heaviness of it until my mom passed away, and then I was able to, or I was, yeah, I was able to take over more as a lead caregiver for my sister and for Pati, and I had my younger sister, or my middle sister, who also was a part of that kind of support system, and it really reshaped kind of how to approach situations and how to kind of approach system work a lot. Um, again, yeah, Heather mentioned macro social work is kind of my little space, and the one-on-one isn't necessarily my jam. I find myself being very tired, but a lot of it comes also from the realization that yes, there is a home life that also requires that kind of skill set and that one-on-one kind of support, and so there is a level of like, how do you gauge when you utilize what skills and what services. Um, and so for me, I think a big thing that my life and my sister being in my life has done to me is really kind of just where like what is required, what is necessary, what is the one thing that if this happens, you're good and everything else falls to the wayside. That kind of like thinking, I think, has really like developed a lot in terms of what how I build, or yeah, I don't know, I'm ranting at this point, but basically how my relationship to systems um, is created. What in a system is required when you are talking about eligibility for services, eligibility for like what is the thing that needs to be done that will get you there, and everything else can fall in line as it comes up. And so that kind of yeah, that kind of like fluidity is something that I've found has come about because of this new role and because of my new skill set. And really being able to apply that after the passing of my mom, because I think that's the one thing that I was able to see it from an external lens of, oh, this is my mom is doing this, I can help support in this end, but to be the one that's like not to necessarily taking the lead, but like really pushing a lot of the conversations, and we'll get into it on this next question in terms of the conversations that are required. It's no, this is what we're like this is what we're doing and this is why, and everything else will fall in line as it comes up. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. We're doing this part. That kind of, I don't know if I answered the question in terms of
Mhm.
qualities and whatnot, but that
Yeah.
kind of thinking and that kind of mindset is something that I have been gifted with just through my life and through the relationship with my sister.
Yeah, I think that yeah, this idea that when you are a sibling in a family with someone with disabilities, flexibility is the name of the game, right? Especially, um, like my sister is nonverbal. So one of the strengths that I've realized I've sort of absorbed from being around her is my ability to read nonverbal communication very well. Um, and I think it's just, yeah, like reading people's posture, facial expressions. She makes a lot of sounds, and, I know which sounds are like her happy sounds, which sounds mean she's scared, which sounds mean she's just annoyed or angry. And I've seen how that has allowed me in a lot of other spaces. I teach music classes. Amanda and Neelam, I both met because they were moms in my music classes for little kids. So, in a space, a lot of those kids, they haven't developed language yet. So communicating with them, working with older adults who might have dementia, or maybe someone that's had a stroke that has aphasia. So yeah, this skill of being able to communicate with people beyond the capacity of language has been something that I really am grateful for. That has allowed me to like communicate with people in all different settings. And I like also what you were saying, David, about this awareness that there needs to be a lot of flexibility within our systems that support the individuals and families of people that have these disabilities, because each, you know, just because someone has Down syndrome doesn't mean that they share all the same characteristics as someone with Down syndrome. Someone with autism, everyone is individual and has their own unique talents and challenges, and being able to figure out, having systems that are flexible enough to accommodate that and to accommodate the nuance within the big realm of disability is important, and is challenging. It excites me that there's, a lot of us that are going into this type of work to help, at the systems level and then also at the family level, like Amanda. Um, so let's go on to this next question, which I think, so we all were talking about sort of the professional, how being a sibling has affected us professionally. Um, but I know it has a big impact on our personal lives, like whether or not we decide to, get married or be in a long-term relationship or have children. And I think also wrapped up in that, like the personal development of our own lives, we always are taking into consideration what our role is going to be in terms of caring and supporting our siblings as our entire family unit ages. Neelam, you were mentioning how there's a lot of different transitions. So my sister turned 50 a couple years ago, and she's always, despite her disability, she's always been a pretty healthy person. She doesn't have, a lot of illness. And we've noticed over the last like 5 years, lots and lots of health conditions are coming up. And I read this study where they compared adults who had adults who had sort of physical disabilities compared to adults that had intellectual disabilities, intellectual and developmental. And the adults that had intellectual disabilities, their chronological age compared to people that were still not typical, they had physical disabilities, their chronological age at 45 was like 100 years older. So like the acceleration of aging and the sort of medical considerations and caregiving considerations that come with that just accelerate, which was very eye-opening for me because, my parents are now in their late 70s. My sister's in her early 50s, but like she's accelerating in terms of her increase of need for caregiving simultaneously with my mom. So yeah, when I look at what my family's going to look like in the future, what my role is going to look like as a caregiver in the not too distant future for both my parents and my sister, it's can it's a lot. Oh, it looks like we lost Amanda, but hopefully she'll pop back in. So, Neelam or David, what comes up for you when you think about the aging of ourselves, our parents, our siblings, changing caregiving needs and roles, and what kind of conversations have you had with your family about the future? Um, and and like what advice would you give to families that are just starting these conversations?
So I can say that I think we need to have multiple plans and multiple contingencies. I am very fortunate, and my parents are very fortunate, I think, to have financial resources to help supplement what the state provides. And then because of the decisions, so part of it is like I made a decision to move back to San Diego. Like my professional life is really based in Washington, D.C.
Mm.
and other places. And I made the decision to return to San Diego in part so that I could provide that as needed respite for my sister. In my sister's situation, I think she's like even keeled for the most part, but then we'll have these moments of real crisis. And I think that's actually what I think that is one of the things that people need to pay attention to is like it'll be smooth sail literally like if now I'm old enough I can give you like a bigger picture of how this lifespan has worked, right? So I'm only a year and a half older than my younger sister. So when I graduated from college is when she graduated out of it went from like being a year apart in school to being 4 years apart by the time she finished her high school and got her and transitioned out of the IEP special ed program type stuff. And actually looking back, I really regret I did not go to my sister's graduation, which because I was thinking, like from my perspective, like there are multiple graduations, and I didn't realize that I really should have honored. I should have made a more of a point to honor the milestones that my sister has. So that's just something for families to really think about. And is the milestones also might look different, but when the so after I graduated from high school, she also she then started experiencing her mental health challenges for the first time. And so that was when I was flying home to help. Basically, the whole family was trying to keep her out of a mental institution. And so so there was that moment. And then it was smooth for a little bit longer, like for 4 years. It was like rocky for a couple months and then smooth and then rocky for another short period of time. And when I was going through law school, I came home every single week. I went to law school locally or, in Los Angeles, and I was coming home every weekend for 3 months. And then it was like we had 20 years of like no real issues. And I think it's really has to do with the respite and like the recognizing that these are chronic conditions. And so but then there was another flare up actually after I had a baby. And it was like 2 years of in it my sister being in and out of the hospital, and we had sort of made a family decision that we were going to do everything we could to keep her out of a hospital. But there's a real physical toll to actually doing that. And then she's just recently gone through, had a couple years of like calm and then another couple years of real challenges around and in that this most recent situation, we've also changed our plan. So it was always the case that my family was going to keep my sister out of a home type, like a mental institution type place. But I think if we had been, I would have, if we had, if going back, I might have liked to have transitioned her to a group home environment in her 20s, the way it would have been more uh, appropriate for her at that moment, right? I think we might be in a different position than we are today, but we didn't. And in the last sort of crisis moment, her behavior really became violent. And it was a situation where I was like, look, I've been on board with this goal of trying to keep her out of an institution, but I am not on board with keeping a violent individual in my home. And if she is a violent person and acting inconsistently, then we really need to rethink the whole shebang. And I think that is what parents and people need to really think about is like, what are um the scenarios. Now, in my sister's situation, her violence is directly related to her mental status. So it's not like, and I think this is the crucial thing is like, that is a flare up, right? It's like when you have someone who has with disabilities, they have like their standard, right? And then it's like, this is, oh, she's like her this is just her being off. I think for people who are that when you interact with system players and people who are kind of employed by systems, they don't know that. They don't know what her baseline is. And then if you tell them, and then the problem is if you tell them like diagnoses, like you use the scary words in psychiatric, or like you say autism, they will be like, oh, well, her behavior is completely consistent with that. And it's like, and it's a real challenge, right? Because it's like, no, my sister, like for if you say autism at a mental health behavioral health center, some people will say that means nonverbal. And it's like, no, like it's just it's really kind of it's shocking, right? And so we have had, but so in terms of concrete things, I live within 10 houses of my sister. And my other older sister lives 4 houses away. And ultimately, we are planning on, when after my parents passed, of consolidating into one home. And part of that is because it's hard to do the day-to-day management, and it's hard to always that flexibility that you need, because like she's having it. Like what I have found is that people need you in crisis moments, and they need you to be there, like, weekly or checking in, on a regular basis. But like when there's a crisis, you being there makes all the difference. And thinking about that is, for us has been like, okay, we need to figure out how our life is going to be in that way. But I will also say that the conversation, because things have been rocky the last couple of years, is that, and because I'm raising a child, is my sister and I, my older sister does not have children, so I'm the only one with children, and we're both single. And we just basically, my older sister and I sat down and, and said, in a calm moment where we weren't trying to make this plan, in a calm, like at the coffee shop, we were like, my sister says, like Sheila is my responsibility, and your responsibility is your daughter Simran. And so it was helpful for me to have that be clear, like, and that way I can be part of the family, but I'm playing support. And I obviously play support in different roles at different times. So like my sister happens to be a doctor, so she plays, she takes lead on those kinds of decisions. And then when I'm a lawyer, I take lead on all of the systems, like form filling out kind of things. And we kind of separate those. But I think it's really important to kind of figure out that there are different ways to be involved, and and then recognizing that different times call for different kinds of scenarios. Um,
Definitely. Yeah,
yeah.
I think thank you for all of that. And flexibility again, right, is so important. And this idea of having sort of multiple contingency plans. I know I definitely, for my entire life, pretty much it's always been understood, not because I was told this, but because it was just something I will be my sister's caregiver when my mom passes away. But I've definitely had those nights where I just wake up in the middle of the night. I'm like, oh my God, what if something happens to me? Like, then what's going to happen? Because I know for parents, I know my mom has said this, other parents I've talked to, when they start talking about like planning for the future, they say it half jokingly, but half in serious. They're like, well, my plan is that I just can't die. Like, I can't die before my child, like, because who is going to take care of them? Um, so I wanted to, Neelam, I mean, how wonderful that you all live in this like very close area. I live 20 minutes from my sister. David, I know your family unit's all together right now. So Amanda, I'd kind of like to open this to you since you are, in a different state than your sister and your mom and brother, and I know you're raising 2 young kids, and how what does this look like for you as far as planning for the future?
Yeah, so part of just through my work and now, going through this with my sister is really trying to build in her autonomy where she can have it, right? I think we're in a system where to get the bare minimum, you have to overemphasize deficits so much that I'm now hearing my sister say things of she's so severe, right? And that's like a term we're moving away from. And I really feel the system has made her feel that way. And so she's really in a place where we're trying to work on her recognizing her skill set, recognizing what she's capable of, um, so that she can build her community beyond us. So I'm married. I have two sons of my own. My brother also married, and three kids. And so, in part of the discussion, as a lawyer, like Neelam was saying, I'm very on my parents about estate planning, getting Kristen what she needs to be protected, right? And so we all came to a meeting with the state attorneys about what protects her the most, in the event my parents pass away. And in Arizona, the money, right, and what I know is like a Cal Able account, right, like that protects her assets the most. But really, a Cal Able account, if she passes away, goes back to the state. So then, right, like learning that, right, and things you don't think about, you see these like hot button topics, but really it's individualized to your financial planning of your family, like what is in the state that the individual or sibling you're supporting is in. So anyways, through all of that, having conversations with her of who would you actually want to live with, who would you want to be supporting. And I think honoring a true sibling dynamic, that we're closer, so we kind of butt heads a little bit, right? She's like, of course, Carter. And that's her brother. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And she's like, but you like all my legal stuff, all my SSI, she knows that's where my skill set is. He's much more patient with her. And I'm like, you can do it. I know you can. Stop being so negative. So, so really like bringing them into the conversation to the maximum extent possible of like what provides meaningfulness to their life. And I think, what Neelam was saying, right, is seeing these ebbs and flows of your sister's mental health really had to also do with what was changes going on in your life. And I think my sister's starting to see that, like with each change, okay, now we don't go to Arizona for Christmas because we have young kids, so we're not traveling. And so that looks much different for her. And being okay with that, right? And so her starting to recognize I need to extend my community of support and who I want to be friends with and rely on. Because her biggest fear is being a burden on anyone. So she would not want like all of us taking care of her and all of us, having to do that. And so we try to build an independence where we can. I'm, in a financial position where I bought a house. She rents the house from me. She's 5 houses down from my parents. So, right, she's still there in a close knit for support, but allowing herself to be independent, where she can while she's still building those skills. But I think the estate planning, when you're in a calm state, not, and, I'd love to hear David's perspective to this too, like before it's, oh my gosh, we have to figure this out. Like, who's the next payee going to be for the SSI money, right? And she is not conserved. So we do supported decision making. So she brings in who she wants. And I would say California is much more, from the policy perspective, much more protective with supported decision making. You can make supported decision making agreement. So bringing in the person who may not have necessarily, again, the systems requiring that deficit, the level of necessity deficit to get a conservatorship ordered, having these other tools in place to ensure their rights are protected and their voices heard without the state, coming in, right, and thinking she has autism, she's nonverbal, right? These biases and assumptions that players come into. So having that conversation with your family of what is our goal as a family, right? What are our morals as a family that we really want to keep at the forefront of this discussion? And then, learning again to really allow her autonomy where it can be, because, right, her whole life is like, you have to go to this school, you have to do this, right? And so how can we bring their strengths and interests into that discussion as well? So it's evolving, and she'd of course love to be in California. And then there's the barrier of cost and switching service organizations and your DDD funding and so forth. And so all of those barriers that really
Yeah.
make, as us having to be flexible, make flexibility for the actual individual very challenging.
Yeah. It's so complex, so many different parts. And like you said, the minute cross state lines, right, you're
Hmm.
dealing with two different systems and
Hmm.
yeah, very, very challenging. I also, it's interesting. So, Neelam and Amanda, you both have, legal backgrounds. I know when my mom and I were going for to become co-conservators for my sister,
Hmm.
my mom used to be an attorney. And I just remember being in that hearing and so my mom has a law degree, so she speaks legalese.
Hmm.
We worked with a special needs attorney. Um, we speak English as our native language. So, and it was so complicated and overwhelming. And I remember there
Hmm.
were so many other people in that same like hearing hall that were not native English speakers
Hmm.
that, may not have had the legal training behind it to like navigate all of this. And it's,
Hmm.
so I think that there's different levels of like privilege and education and
Hmm.
access that can
Hmm.
also so much affect the services and supports that different people get even within the same system. So yes, David, I think, we'd love to have you chime into this, future planning aspect since your family did already go through a loss of, like you said, your sister's person,
Mhm.
tied by the to the hip, and I can't imagine, going through, I know it was pandemic and grief, and trying to also support Patty with her how she's grieving. Oh,
Mhm.
so much. So
Yeah, no, when I saw that question, I was like, oh yeah, this is gonna oof, give me a give me a second on that one because it is a really, really rough thing to like it's really rough and I'll again, this can be a full another webinar in my opinion. Like it's a complicated topic and we only have 7 minutes, so I'll
Hmm.
keep in mind that. But I think a big thing is really it's hard to have these conversations in your head because then you just feel guilty, you feel resentment, you feel all of these like all of the feelings of like, oh, maybe I do want my sister to live in a group home because it would give her the socialization, it would give her this, but then it would also like
Hmm.
alleviate some of the responsibility. And so it's a really, really rough and complicated conversation to have internally. And then to be able to do that externally it hurts sometimes even
Hmm.
more because then you're really sitting with all of the feelings and all of the guilt and all of the resentment that not only you carry, but like potentially parents do and
Hmm.
potentially other siblings do. Um, I can't speak to the case of having my sister in those conversations in the same way that others can, because my sister is also nonverbal, more on the
Hmm.
moderate to severe, if we are using a moderate to severe kind of space. And so it's a really rough thing when trying to like hold these conversations.
Hmm.
And I think one of the things that has recently been really helpful for us, specifically after my mom passed away, is that I had always been the one bringing in like from a social work lens, bringing in that kind of rough, hey, maybe we really do need to have, hey, maybe we really should
Hmm.
be looking at. And so for us, it was really, really an amazing time to have a partner kind of these wraparound services come into the home and really moderate and like facilitate those conversations from an external perspective. And we had this resource service for like about I mean maybe a year and a half, maybe 2 years, and it was phenomenal. We had weekly meetings. It really opened up and pushed these conversations of what are we doing? What are the goals? And
Hmm.
Neelam, you kind of brought up this idea of like clarity of like what are the roles? Who's doing what? Let's really like lay it out. And I think that's something that has really helped a lot. I think that there is always going to be space for more clarity, for more conversations, because things change and people grow, and we're talking about aging as a family unit. So
Hmm.
all of these things kind of take place. And so I yeah, it's really rough. It's a really rough time, especially to be dealing with the loss of the main care person um, who, for my sister, is grieving constantly the loss of not having
Hmm.
these interactions, not having this kind of care in the same way that she had it with my mom. We're also grieving the loss of my mom in more ways than one, not just like our relationship, but our relationship now every time that we are interacting with my sister because of her grief. And so it's complicated all around. And then on my individual level, it's this like I am going into my early, or I'm leaving my late 20s into early 30s. I'm 28 now. So it's like where does my personal like life come into
Hmm.
play, and what kind of decisions do I get to do?
Hmm.
Coming back to the selfishness and the like these conversations that happen internally on a day-to-day basis that I think not a lot of people really understand unless you're in it. And that's where like the sibling perspective is really um under talked about, if I can say that. Like it's just it's not something that's really ever brought in. Um because I think even if parents are given this situation, the siblings are still seeing it. They are still a part of it, and whether they are kind of protected from that or not, eventually things come up and things will be there. And so preparation is always key. But I think a big part of it, for at least for my family and for the folks that are in my life, it's who can be the third party that can help really navigate all of the resources. I feel like I can, like I am pretty good at that, but I also feel like I'm also not meant to play that part in those roles and in that conversation. So it's just, yeah, it is harsh to hold all of those realities, because you love your sibling and you love your person and you love your family. And also, when does it come back to us as individuals and us as people who are growing and developing? So yeah, I fully ranted. I had
I
little
know.
note things, but yeah, just it is a rough time, but it
Yeah,
is also a beautiful time because you get to grow and you get to build skill sets, like I mentioned previously, that I wouldn't have had. So yeah, lovely, lovely times. And
wonderful.
thank you, Heather, for opening up this space and really pushing for this kind of conversation and these kind of webinars. And I know that you're a huge advocate for SIB, so I'm excited to see kind of more of the work that you bring to the table on this kind of stuff.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I wish we had more time. I knew the time would go fast with this conversation. And I agree that it is, that the sibling experience is a neglected one. I think that our perspective and our role in these family dynamics um, is needs to be more included. I think that that's, when we talk about systems, my sort of goal as a macro level social worker is going to be focusing on family caregiving and really advocating for the role of siblings in that the world as our population is aging, as there's more people being born who are diagnosed with things like autism, people are living longer, there's a lot to be. Siblings are going to be playing a bigger and bigger role in our siblings lives as our lifespans extend. Um, so wow, this was so much wisdom from all of you. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you, everyone in the audience. I didn't see any chats or questions. Um, but yeah, so thank you so much for joining us today. A huge thank you to our panelists for sharing some of their life story, their relationship journeys, and their tips for advocating for their siblings as well as themselves. Um, oh, I do see, sorry, I see that someone asked a question. If you could type it in again, I didn't see it pop up. So if you could type in your question, I'll keep an eye out for that. Um, in the meantime, I'm going to I'm seeing if there's something popping up here. I don't see it right now. Um, I am going to share my screen really quick. Mhm. If I can, where's my share? There we go. So on your screen right now, if you could take the time to um, shoot that QR code and take a brief survey on this webinar, we would really appreciate it. Your feedback is really helpful to us and it helps us develop future webinars and programming. If you have any questions or comments that we weren't able to address today, you can feel free to reach out to me, Heather Robert. My address is hrobert@sdsu.edu. You can also use the QR code below that to sign up for our monthly newsletter from the Social Policy Institute called In the Loop. That is where we will be announcing our next webinars. We have two more left in this series. We'll have one in September. Yeah, September and November, and we're working on those topics right now. In fact, I might be reaching out to some of our panelists for some of the professional contacts they have to see if we can explore some of the things that we talked about here on one of those webinars. And in that In the Loop newsletter, we also provide highlights from policy and program developments that affect the world of disability. So thank you very much for your time. Have a great day. And oh, hold on. I'm going to say one more second. Let me find my Q&A because that's where my question is. Okay. I know we're over time, but we're going to go for this because it's exciting that we have an audience question. So the question is, I have two children who are 15 months apart. My daughter is 4 and my son is 3, and he is autistic and nonverbal. What tips do you have for school enrollment? My daughter and son are very close, and my daughter often stands as his voice and advocate. Yep, we all know that. Even at daycare, the school my daughter will begin to attend this fall may not accept my son's IEP. As a sibling, do you think this would be difficult for my son as he transitions to a different school next year? I was going to say, I feel like, Amanda, this is your wheelhouse.
Yeah, I have like a different legal perspective, I think, than from a sibling perspective, but I would say, would it be challenging? And so just transitioning back to when my sister had to go to a different school, I think when she had a different school that really honored who she is and her abilities and what she enjoyed, she was able to find her friend group there who ended up being her friends who throughout her entire school career. Whereas then when I had gone to school with her, that's where I saw her eating alone by herself. And that like really had an impact on me, where then it impacted my ability to learn and focus on my schooling, right? So I think in analyzing the needs of both of your kids, really understanding like if it's a school that wouldn't accept his IEP, quotes around that of whether that's legal or not, but would she then have to fill that role even more to her detriment when really at that young of an age, that's where she should start building her autonomy. And I think really feeling okay, some separation from her brother, outside of just that only being her role. And I have many other thoughts, but that's my initial
Thanks,
thinking on that.
Amanda. I do want to be sensitive to time, so we
Mhm.
are, it's already a little over an hour. So thank you, everybody who, again, all the panelists and everybody in the audience who commented and offered questions for us. We will be sending out an email with the recording of this seminar or webinar, and in that we will also be providing some resources specific to the sibling experience. And I will, include contact information for Amanda and Neelam and David, if you have any resources that you want me to include as well, we'll share that in that email. So thank you again so much for spending your lunch hour with us. We hope that this was valuable and that we will see you again in September for our next webinar. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you,
Thank you.
Heather.
Bye.
Thank you.